Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. My guest today is Kathleen Stein, president of the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County. Today we're going to talk about what you need to know about this year's election and the 2023 ballot. Kathy, welcome back to North Country Matters. Today's conversation will, we hope, help voters understand what to expect on the 23 ballot. There are a number of changes and things to be aware of as voters head to the polls this year. But as always, the League of Women Voters has the tools and the information we need, right?
You got it. Thanks for having me, Donna. And when it comes to voting, the League has you covered. There are a number of new laws that have been signed into effect this year that will help voters access their ballot.
One of the most important changes has been to significantly shorten the time frame for a voter to register to vote. Kathy, tell us what the so-called Golden Day means for voters this year.
Yes, I'm happy to. This is something the League has been working towards for years. The voter registration deadline now is only 10 days before the election, which is the minimum mandated by the New York State Constitution. Thus, the new law has created a golden day on the first day of the early voting period, when New Yorkers can both register to vote and cast their ballots using an affidavit ballot at an early voting site. In effect, this is almost the same day voting registration that several other states already have. According to our local Board of Elections here in St. Lawrence County, if you register at an early polling site on October 28th, the Board of Elections should have your name and information uploaded into their system by the next day. This is a significant reform of New York's voting laws, which in terms of voter registration deadline were until a few years ago one of the most restrictive in the nation. One of the positive outcomes of the COVID emergency has been to greatly improve voting access here in the Empire State. For example, a second voting law change establishes a system for early voting by mail. While there has been an absentee ballot available for years in New York State, there were special conditions that applied to vote absentee. Thanks to the pandemic emergency, New York created a temporary no excuses absentee ballot program that was very successful. This latest change makes that a permanent feature for all voters.
We should also note that although a lawsuit has been filed challenging the constitutionality of this particular change, the League and other supporters feel strongly that it will be found constitutional because it has been working successfully now for 2 or 3 years here in the state. So it's not that big a change, is it?
No, it isn't really, and it's had a thorough test run during COVID, as it were. So.
And one of the reasons why why the local board of elections can make the change so quickly is because we've gone to the electronic poll books, which means they can be updated immediately, and then every election inspector has that updated information almost instantaneously. So that's why they can get it done within 24 hours.
Yes, it's fantastic, and also easier to verify the identity, the authenticity of the identity of voters and that kind of thing with electronic records. So yes, it's a brave new world of voting.
It is. So there's also a number of other reforms that are in place for this year. Local jails must provide voter registration information to individuals of voting age being released from a local correctional facility. There's new legislation that requires the State Board of Elections to develop and provide uniform training program for poll workers, and local boards of election, BOCES, charter schools, and non-public schools are required to adopt policies to promote student voter registration and pre-registration. And again, this was a new law several years ago that actually allowed 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote, and as a way to encourage them to become lifelong voters.
Yes, and we know that if you start voting early, it can be a lifelong habit. Yeah, these are all terrific new laws. I'd like to mention that the League provides an online tool for voters called Vote 411. Anyone can use it to find out if they are registered to vote, what their new state districts are, who their candidates are, and where their polling place is on election day. vote411.org is really a one-stop shopping for voters for all the critical information they need to be informed before they go to the polls.
It is, and it's a great tool, and it's very easy to access and very easy to use. All it requires is your address, and then it gives you all the detailed information you need. So let's also explain what elections or what offices are up for election this fall, Kathy.
Um, yes. Basically, that's right. 2023 is a so-called off-year election, which means there are no state or federal offices up for election. But the local races are just as important, and in fact, even more so, because your local officials make decisions that affect your life most directly.
Yeah, not only do those local officials affect you directly, but they're also the easiest officials for you to get a hold of because they are literally in your town, in your village, in your city, in your county. And there's not very many layers between you and this particular crop of elected officials. So if you have a concern or a problem or a complaint, you can get to them very directly without having to go through any kind of the sorts of hoops we have to jump through to get to state and federal officials. So
Yes.
basically, everything on your ballot is local this year, except for two proposed amendments to the state constitution, which we will talk about in a minute. County voters will be voting for county clerk and county sheriff and for a state Supreme Court judge. Plus, every town, village, and city in the county will have seats up for election for everything from mayor to supervisor, from trustee to council member, town clerks, town justices, and highway superintendents. Your local officials are directly responsible for making the laws and regulations that affect your community. So you really need to pay attention to who is running and what they plan to do if they get into office.
Yes. These these are very important. We can't say it too many times. Local elections are very important. You can get a look at your ballot ahead of time by going to the Board of Elections website here in St. Lawrence County. Each voting district in each township will have a PDF version of the ballot for that district. And the sample ballot will list the offices up for election, the candidates for each office, and their political party or parties if they're running on more than one party line. And we'll also show the location on the ballot to look exactly like your ballot will look, so you can get a feel for what that will be like. There's also room for write-in candidates on each ballot in in the event that you want to vote for someone who isn't on the ballot.
And something we might mention for folks who this may be their first election voting because they're a new voter, that those sample ballots are actually what will be printed the day you go into the polls and you give your information, and the poll worker prints your ballot right in front of you so that you can fill it out and then put it into the machine for tabulating. So it's not going to be at all difficult for you to get a look at your ballot before you get into the polling place. There's another very useful tool that the league offers for voters. Voters can sign up for the league texting service to get timely reminders on voting. You text Vote New York to 474747. You get information on registering to vote, when to apply for an absentee ballot, deadlines for turning in that ballot, the days of early voting, and a reminder about Election Day, which this year will be November 7th.
Yes, and this is a good time to tell voters, remind people a little bit more about early voting. There are 9 days of early voting in New York State, which stretch this year from October 28th to November 5th. Here in the county, there are 2 early voting sites. One is at 42 Maple Street in Potsdam, right next to Kinney Drugs. And the other is at 100 Riverside Avenue in Ogdensburg, in the Dobisky Center. Both of these polling locations are accessible to voters with disabilities. And remember, if you cast a ballot during the early voting period or by absentee ballot, you will not be allowed to cast a ballot also on Election Day.
And that's an important reminder for folks because we want to make sure that every vote is counted and that it's properly counted, and that's one way to ensure that. And of course, you can always cast your ballot on Election Day at your regular polling place, which will be on Tuesday, November 7th from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And at some point, you will be getting very shortly a yellow postcard in the mail from the Board of Elections, which will remind you about where your polling site is. So that's another check. If for some reason you don't get that postcard, be sure to check your registration because there may be a problem. But that's usually a great reminder that voting is coming up and where to vote.
Right, right. Yeah, you might have gotten it already, but yeah, the watch always every year, watch for that card from
That's
the
right.
Board of Elections.
And Kathy, let's remind folks that in addition to the candidates for office on the front of their ballot, they also need to flip that ballot over. What are they going to find there?
When they flip their ballot over, they will find ballot initiatives in this year. You will find 2 statewide constitutional amendments, proposed constitutional amendments that you'll be asked to vote on. Both of these have to do with debt, public debt, and they are very important to their constituencies. Amendment number 1 would allow small city school districts to carry more debt. The proposed amendment to Article 8, Section 4 of the Constitution removes the special constitutional debt limitation now placed on small city school districts, so they will be treated the same as all other school districts. Keep in mind, this will affect several cities here in the North Country: Watertown, Ogdensburg, and Plattsburgh. Ballot question 2 extends for 10 years the authority of counties, cities, towns, and villages to remove from their constitutional debt limits debt for the construction of sewage facilities. That was the exact wording, by the way. Given the aging water systems in many North Country communities, this will help local governments improve the infrastructure in their locality. So again, these are fitting with the local theme of this year's elections, but do give those ballot questions your full consideration.
And it's not only important always to give a full consideration to a ballot issue, but to realize just how wide-ranging these are. And some of these issues you would think would be able to be handled by legislation. In this particular case, it has to be handled through a change to the state constitution. So voters really are carrying, to use the phrase, a lot of water in this election when it comes to these particular issues, because it means that their local governments and their local school system can operate more efficiently. So it is important that we always remember that those ballot items, which are always on the back of the ballot, are critical for every voter to take into consideration. Kathy, thank you for coming in today. We hope this edition of North Country Matters helps you to become a better informed voter. Remember that elections are decided by the people who vote, so make sure your vote counts. Kathy, why don't you give us your League of Women Voters elevator speech and remind people about what the League does and how they can become a member.
The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that works to educate and inform the public and encourage them to vote, obviously. We also work to influence public policy through education and advocacy work with elected officials. And you can join the League by going to the website of the League of Women Voters of New York State, LWVNY.org, and they will make sure that your membership gets to the appropriate local league. So join us.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. So remember, you have 3 ways to vote this fall: by absentee ballot, through the 9 days of early voting, and on election day. These conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Remember, our North Country matters, and so does your vote.